At first, she was all in. She'd light up when his name appeared on her phone. She'd wait a little too long just to make sure her reply wasn't too eager, even though her heart already was. Every moment felt like a spark. The kind of beginning that makes you believe in magic again. But magic doesn't last if it's only one person casting spells. Little by little, her light dimmed. Not all at once, no, it was subtle. He never noticed the first shift because he wasn't paying attention. Maybe she stopped texting first. Maybe she stopped laughing as loudly at his jokes. Maybe she started saying, "I'm fine." And he took it at face value, but here's what he never understood. She didn't stop caring. She just stopped begging to be cared for. She got tired of being the one who always initiated the conversations, the plans, the effort. Tired of feeling like an option when she made him a priority. He thought her love would stay unconditional and endless. He thought she would stay just because she always had. He confused her patience for permanence. She wasn't asking for the world, she was asking for presence. She was asking to be seen, not glanced at. Seen in the way you remember small details, in the way you show up without being asked, in the way your energy says, "I choose you still." He gave her a version of himself that was convenient, casual, distracted. He thought not hurting her was enough. He didn't cheat, didn't yell, didn't leave. But sometimes the worst wounds are the quiet ones, the kind that come from feeling emotionally abandoned by someone who's still physically there. And here's the twist. She didn't leave with a storm. She didn't scream, didn't throw plates, didn't demand closure. No, she just drifted. Her laughter got quieter. Her eyes stopped searching for his. Her presence became polite, but distant, and when she finally walked away, she didn't slam the door, she closed it softly, gently, as if to say, "I loved you, but I love me more now." And by the time he turned around to ask what went wrong, she was already a stranger to the version of himself he refused to outgrow, because he never understood this. You can't keep a woman's heart if you make her feel like a burden for needing yours. Emotional neglect doesn't always look like abuse. Sometimes it's absence in presence. It's when someone is physically there but emotionally unavailable. He sat beside her on the couch, but his eyes were on his phone. He showed up to dinner, but never asked how her day truly was. He replied to her texts, but never really engaged. And slowly, she started to feel invisible next to the person she was supposed to feel safest with. That's what people rarely understand. You don't have to yell or leave bruises to hurt someone. Sometimes the deepest wounds are made in silence. She didn't need constant attention. She just needed to feel like she mattered. But he couldn't see how the little things added up, the ignored stories, the half-hearted hugs, the way he listened without really hearing. She would glance at him mid-conversation and realize he wasn't there with her, not really. His body was present, but his heart and mind were somewhere else, and over time she stopped trying to pull him back in. He thought being in the same room was enough, that not fighting meant everything was fine. But she was fading, slowly, and he didn't notice because he never looked closely enough. That's how emotional neglect works. It doesn't explode, it erodes. It turns vibrant connection into cold coexistence. And when she finally pulled away, it seemed sudden to him, but it wasn't. It had been happening for weeks, maybe months. The warmth had been leaking out drop by drop. He thought he was doing his part by staying. He didn't realize that love requires more than showing up. It requires effort, depth, and presence that goes beyond just being in the room. She stopped asking because she got tired of being unheard, not because she stopped caring. In the beginning, she would express her needs openly, hoping he'd listen, hoping something would shift. She tried to explain what she needed, how she felt, what made her feel distant or unloved, but each time her words were brushed aside, minimized, or met with defensiveness. She wasn't looking for perfection, just presence, just acknowledgement. She wanted to feel like her emotions mattered, like her voice carried weight, but over time, she realized that repeating herself didn't change anything. It only exhausted her, so she started to shrink her expectations. She started to withhold the things she once shared so freely, not out of manipulation, but out of protection. protection from the disappointment that came from being vulnerable with someone who didn't value the vulnerability. She still noticed the things that hurt, the small rejections, the lack of eye contact, the way he forgot the things that were important to her. She just stopped pointing them out, not because she suddenly didn't care, but because it started to feel useless. It started to feel like she was talking to a wall, and when a woman starts to feel that her emotional needs are a burden, she pulls back, slowly and quietly. He may have thought she became distant for no reason, that she just lost interest without warning. But what he never understood was that she had been giving him warnings all along, in her words, in her tone, in her tears. He just never truly heard her. She didn't want to nag. She wanted to connect. She didn't want to lecture. She wanted to feel safe opening up. But once she learned that being open only led to being dismissed, she chose silence over repetition. He mistook her silence for peace, not realizing it was withdrawal. At first, they fought. She would voice her concerns, express her disappointment, argue when things felt unfair or unbalanced. She fought for clarity, for connection, for the relationship itself. But somewhere along the line, she got tired. Tired of the cycle, tired of raising her voice only to be met with indifference or defensiveness, tired of feeling like the only one trying to fix something that was slowly breaking. So she stopped fighting, and he thought that meant everything was okay. He took her quiet as a sign of resolution, not recognizing that it was a sign of resignation. She wasn't okay. She was shutting down. She was learning how to stop needing what he wouldn't give. She was convincing herself that silence was safer than hope. He never saw it for what it truly was, a turning point. The moment she emotionally checked out, even if she hadn't physically left yet, she became quieter, more agreeable, less reactive. She smiled to keep the peace, but it never reached her eyes. She didn't push anymore, didn't press for answers, didn't ask to be seen. He thought they had matured past conflict. But what really happened was she had accepted that conflict required two people who cared enough to resolve it, and she no longer believed he was one of them. She began to retreat into herself, into her own space, her own thoughts. He didn't notice the shift because he had grown used to her doing the emotional labor. Now that she had stopped, the silence felt like calm to him. But for her, it was the sound of distance growing, of love unraveling quietly in the space between two people who used to be close. Love isn't sustained by history, it's fueled by consistent attention and effort. Just because things were magical in the beginning doesn't mean they'll stay that way without work. Memories can't hold up a relationship when the present feels empty. She remembered the way he used to look at her like she was the only person in the room, the way he used to surprise her with small gestures, the way he listened so attentively when she spoke. In the early days, he made her feel cherished, desired, and prioritized. But with time, those gestures faded, the attention became routine, the connection began to feel assumed rather than nurtured. He thought the strength of what they had built would carry them through. He believed the foundation was enough. But love, no matter how strong at first, needs nourishment to survive. She wasn't asking for grand declarations every day, just the little things, a genuine check-in, a thoughtful touch, a reminder that he still saw her, still chose her. He didn't realize that what makes a woman stay isn't the history you share, but how you make her feel in the present moment. Love that relies too heavily on the past becomes a burden. She needed to know she was still valued, still appreciated, still worth the effort. But he stopped trying, assuming she would always be there. He believed loyalty came from time spent, not from how she was treated. He stopped showing up emotionally, thinking she'd understand, and maybe she did, but that understanding came with sadness. It came with the slow realization that love shouldn't feel like something you have to chase. That no matter how much you've shared, if the energy isn't mutual now, the relationship becomes a memory in real time, not a living connection. By the time he noticed her distance, she had already found peace in detachment. The shift didn't happen overnight. It was gradual, like a tide pulling back from the shore. She began to smile more around others and less around him. She started to pour her energy into things that didn't involve him, her work, her friends, her self-care. He thought she was just busy, maybe going through a phase, maybe needing space. But the truth was, she had been slowly building a life where his presence was no longer necessary. She had cried all her silent tears in private. She had stayed up on nights he slept peacefully, trying to figure out what more she could give without losing herself completely. She had begged for emotional closeness in ways he never noticed through her gestures, her tone, her efforts to connect. And when none of it was enough, she stopped trying. He only began to notice the shift when her tone became neutral, when her affection became formal, when the warmth in her eyes faded into polite indifference. But what he failed to see was that she wasn't punishing him, she was protecting herself. She had realized that clinging to someone who made her feel unseen was far lonelier than being alone. Her detachment wasn't out of malice. It was the result of exhaustion, of showing up time and time again and feeling like her heart had nowhere to land. She stopped needing his validation, his attention, his effort, because she had finally started giving those things to herself. And while he was waking up to the emotional gap that had grown between them, she had already walked through it. She had already mourned the version of them that used to exist and learned how to live without it.